Hitler had an idea that Germans were the superior race, that he needed to give them enough space to reproduce pure Aryan children. This would lead him down the path to start World War II. This would lead to many after effects, like the destruction of Europe, millions dead, hunger, unemployment, NATO, and the Eastern Bloc. 1914, World War One started. It would take 4 years for the war to end. World War One left the German Empire in ruins. As of 1918, on the 11th month, on the 11th day of the 11th hour, the German Empire surrendered. The war left the German Empire broken. Uprisings happened everywhere, but in 1919, the German Empire signed the Treaty of Versailles, making it lose territory, pay money it didn't have, and admit the war was their fault. Put in place of the German Empire was the ill-equipped Weimar Republic. With having to pay money to allies, inflation rose in the country, as in 1923, $1 was worth 4 billion German marks. Bread prices went up quickly. People lined up everywhere to get free food from wherever they could. Banknotes and savings were now worthless. People went to collect paychecks in wheelbarrows now. Money was so worthless that children played with stacks of it. With inflation rising, all the government could do was print more money. One woman burnt money to stay warm instead of keeping it. With Germany not being able to pay its debt off, the French occupied the Ruhr in 1923, an industrial area on the Rhine River. They took resources from the area, further crippling Germany's economy. Posters went up telling the people to not work. A total of 130 German civilians died during the occupation. At this time, Germans were at a civil unrest, letting them to be hypnotized by one man's ideas. The Nazi Party was like your ordinary right-wing Germany party. They would meet in beer halls, but the thing that made them different was a leader, Adolf Hitler. Hitler was a man that could speak and excite a crowd, but he believed that Jews and communists were evil, and Jews were nothing but rats. In 1923, Hitler tried a coup in Munich to take power, but failed, and was sentenced to 5 years in prison, where he only spent 9 months. In jail, he wrote his autobiography called Mein Kampf, meaning My Struggle. In the book, he writes on politics, anti-Semitism, and his life. Like all right-wing parties, the Nazis had a paramilitary organization built up by mostly young men. They mostly beat up rival parties, protected Hitler while he talked, and beat Jews. Nazis often protested Jewish stores and would sometimes even beat people who bought from them. Slowly but surely, with more Germans being annoyed and wanting something new, they turned to Hitler's idea of a pure Aryan race. In 1933, Hitler was appointed Chancellor by President Hindenburg under increased pressure, but disaster struck about a month after. Historians debate if the Nazis did it themselves, but the government building, the Reichstag, was set ablaze. One thing to note was that Hitler was seen visibly distressed and annoyed after the fire. A decree was sent out the day after that all rival parties and enemies of Hitler were to be sent to the newly constructed concentration camps of Dachau, the first of many. The following year, President Hindenburg died, letting the Nazis be in full power. By this time, the whole of the German people pledged allegiance to Hitler. The years following were years of spitting on Jews. Crude pictures of them were drawn in magazines. One popular magazine was called Der Stürmer. Many Jews lost their jobs and property. What was the nail in the coffin for Jews living in Germany, though, was the Nuremberg laws that were published in 1935, which said 3 things. Germans and Jews were prohibited from marrying. Jews could not have intercourse with Germans, and pretty much stating you are no longer a citizen of the state. The Nacht der Zerferen Glas, the night of broken glass, or Kristallnacht, was the night of terror when homes were broken into and Jews lynched, homes stolen from, and more in 1938. With most people being unknown of the killing of Jews, they still believed in Hitler as the glorious Führer. In 1938, Hitler annexed Austria and paraded through Vienna. Many Jews during that time were sentenced to clean the streets. In the following months, Hitler demanded the Sudetenland, a land full of ethnic Germans, part of the country of Czechoslovakia. A meeting is held with the Allies, and agreement comes that Hitler will not invade the rest of Czechoslovakia, ensuring peace in our time. A year later, Hitler invades the rest of Czechoslovakia. Now, the German Reich demands Danzig, a former part of the German Empire. Poland refuses. With Poland refusing and joining the Allies, Germany banks on that France will not invade from behind, and Operation West kicks off. On September 1st, 1939, the invasion of Poland begins. By the 28th, the Poles capitulate and Warsaw was under their control. With the secret Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact being set up, this is what the borders of Eastern Europe looked like. Then came a 9-month period known as the Phony War. Then, in 1940, the sea invasions and air invasions of Norway and Denmark began. Denmark would fall in 6 hours, while Norway would take to June 10th for them to lay down arms. Then came France and the lowlands. Luxembourg, Netherlands, and Belgium all came crumbling down. And a month after the invasion, the Wehrmacht was in Paris. And 2 weeks later, the French were reduced to a puppet state. Posters came up saying, "Victory is with our eagle." And finally came the Balkans, as the Axis swept through Yugoslavia and Greece. By 1941, this is what the Axis looked like. Operation Barbarossa began in 1941, the main goal of the Reich. But what they didn't know, it was doomed to begin with. The final solution. The final solution was the plan to exterminate Jews of Europe by any means necessary. After a conference in 1942, many concentration camps were built. These were for killing, not holding. In the occupied Soviet areas, Germans had mobile killing units coming in from behind the army to kill Jews in the area. People were forced to leave their homes and live in 5-mile disease-ridden homes. These were the main ghettos of all of Eastern Europe, and the big ones all in Poland. Auschwitz was one of the main camps. Arbeit macht frei, where work sets you free. People arrived every day, and every day families were torn apart. Most never saw each other again, and many were forced to wear prison clothes and sleep next to where their parents died in the gas chambers. Normal people, kids, babies, and the medically challenged were all killed for doing nothing. And the chief of the SS, Heinrich Himmler, even came to Auschwitz to visit, and like all of the Nazis, saw no problem with killing thousands. Before its liberation, another 20,000 died. Even though Hitler killed millions, the propaganda painted him as a god. By 1942, these were all the countries that Germany had invaded. Maybe it was the loss at Stalingrad that doomed them. Maybe it was the invasion of Italy. Or maybe it was D-Day that finished them off. But I believe that Operation Barbarossa was doomed to the start. By April 1945, the Soviets had encircled Berlin. Maybe it was a fear of revenge by the Soviets, or maybe he had enough of it. But on April 30th, 1945, Hitler took his own life with his wife and dog in Führer bunker, marking the end of his reign of terror. And just 8 days later, the Germans surrendered. In 1950, this is what the Jewish population now looked like. On May 7th, 1945, the last of the Wehrmacht laid down their guns. By this time, people celebrated the war, but what they didn't realize, they'd have to figure out how to charge Nazis. But the after effects were even more huge. 45 million dead, Europe and Asia left to rubble, hunger, unemployment, decolonization, and the Eastern Bloc being set up. If I told you Hitler caused all this, would you believe me? Would you believe he left Europe in rubble? Would you believe that he left Europe in such a mess that the Soviets could set up the Eastern Bloc, which would torment Eastern Europe for another 50 years? This is what one man's idea led to.